Welcome to the podcast summary of Murray Rothbard. Today's episode is about Murray Rothbard, one of the most influential and most divisive figures in modern libertarian thought. He helped build anarcho-capitalism into a full worldview, tried to connect economics, ethics, history, and politics into one big system, and left behind a legacy that's impossible to separate from the sharper, darker edges of his ideas. So this is both the story of a movement builder and of a thinker whose work kept producing controversy, schisms, and some genuinely alarming conclusions. Rothbard took laissez-faire much further than his teacher Ludwig von Mises was willing to go. Where Mises accepted a minimal state to protect markets, Rothbard argued that the state itself was basically organized robbery on a grand scale. From there, he asked the obvious next question in his own framework. If markets are better, why stop at groceries and factories? Why not police, courts, and even military defense? That made him a founding theorist of anarcho-capitalism, a version of libertarianism that wants to abolish the state's monopoly on force and replace it with competing private providers. Methodologically, Rothbard followed Mises into praxeology, the idea that economic laws can be derived through logical reasoning about human action rather than built mainly from statistics or empirical testing. That put him well outside mainstream economics, which is one reason academia mostly sidelined him even when some readers found the internal logic of his work rigorous and persuasive. He also wasn't interested in keeping economics in a neat little box. He tried to turn it into part of a broader science of liberty, tying together economics, history, ethics, and political philosophy into one unified project. On money, Rothbard was radically hardline. He blamed the Great Depression on government policy failures, not some built-in instability of capitalism, and he treated Keynesian management of money and credit as a source of disorder rather than a cure. He opposed central banking, fiat money, and fractional reserve banking, which he called fraudulent, and he wanted a gold standard with 100% reserves. Even within Austrian economics, that was too absolute for some people. Others in that tradition preferred monetary stability in a more practical sense, like stable nominal spending, rather than an iron rule against inflation. Rothbard grounded libertarian rights in self-ownership and private property, and he defended that with natural law reasoning, not just with the argument that markets happen to work better. He also took a very strict line on property acquisition. If someone mixed labor with previously unowned land, he treated that property claim as fully legitimate, unless it was later transferred voluntarily. He accepted equality before the law, but he saw enforced economic or social equality as coercive and contrary to reality itself. That same strictness is what led him into some of his most unsettling positions, especially on children. He denied that parents should have legally enforceable duties to feed, clothe, or educate their children, and he speculated that a market in adoption or transfers of parental rights would reduce neglect. Critics looked at that and basically said, your rights theory has now bulldozed ordinary moral judgment, because it seems to allow a parent to let an infant starve without legal consequence. His legal theory could get equally severe on crime and punishment. Rothbard favored proportional retribution, so if someone stole $15,000, they would owe restitution plus an additional $15,000 penalty. More controversially, he argued that police could torture a suspected murderer for information if the suspect later turned out to be guilty, while police themselves should be punished if the suspect was innocent. You can hear the tension right away. A system built around strict rights and proportionality suddenly gives authorities a huge incentive to use coercion first and sort out the justification later. Rothbard was also famously combative. He attacked not just ideological opponents, but allies, predecessors, and fellow libertarians with a kind of academic flamethrower energy. He called Adam Smith a plagiarist, Keynes a shallow opportunist, John Stuart, a woolly man of mush, and Milton Friedman a statist and establishment apologist. His relationship with Ayn Rand followed a similarly dramatic arc. Early praise for Atlas Shrugged, then a break, then open ridicule of her movement as dogmatic and cult-like. Within the Austrian school, he kept battling over method and theory, while some other Austrians basically saw him less as a conventional economist than as a property rights theorist with Austrian influences. One of Rothbard's most consistent themes was anti-war politics. He believed war expands state power, fuels militarization, entrenches conscription and the military-industrial complex, and generally leaves liberty in worse shape afterward. That anti-interventionism shaped his views on U.S. foreign policy, including opposition to Middle East intervention, and the argument that U.S. support for Israel intensified conflict rather than solved it. But his anti-war framework came with major exceptions and major revisionism. He celebrated the American Revolution and the Confederate cause in the Civil War, arguing that Union victory opened the door to centralized coercive state power. More broadly, he promoted historical revisionism against what he saw as state-approved narratives pushed by court intellectuals, and he blamed Western democracies for initiating major 20th century conflicts. That whole project was badly discredited by his close ties to Holocaust deniers and by his publication and defense of their work, which later scholars have linked to parts of the prehistory of Holocaust denial and the alt-right. Politically, Rothbard moved around a lot over the years. Old-right anti-interventionism, the New Left for a period, the Libertarian Party, and then a late turn toward paleoconservatives and right-wing populists. He came to think libertarians shouldn't just wait for education and persuasion to do the job. Instead, he wanted strategic alliances that could attack what he saw as the partnership between big government, corporate elites, and organized interests. That paleo-libertarian turn is one of the most controversial parts of his legacy, especially because he praised figures like Joseph McCarthy and David Duke as models of populist disruption. That helped make him a precursor to later libertarian right and alt-right currents, whether admirers want to admit that or not. His hostility to egalitarianism also spilled directly into social politics. He attacked feminism, women's suffrage activism, affirmative action, civil rights legislation, and court-ordered school integration. He argued that politically active women helped advance the welfare state, and he treated government-enforced integration as a violation of property rights. Historians have described these positions as openly contemptuous toward the civil rights and women's movements, and race remained a central, deeply divisive part of his political thought. For all the marginality of his academic career, Rothbard mattered because he built things. He taught, mentored students, wrote constantly, and helped create institutions that gave libertarian thought a durable home. The Center for Libertarian Studies, the Journal of Libertarian Studies, the Cato Institute, and the Ludwig von Mises Institute. His clashes with people like Charles Koch and Ed Crane mattered too, because they reflected a permanent split inside libertarianism, radical anti-state theory on one side, and policy-oriented attempts to influence actual government on the other. That may be the cleanest way to understand his legacy. He wasn't just a theorist with extreme views. He helped build the infrastructure that carried those views forward. So Rothbard's story is a mix of intellectual ambition, institutional success, and a long trail of arguments that kept getting more uncompromising and, in some cases, more disturbing. If you want to understand modern anarcho-capitalism, libertarian faction fights, and some of the ideological bridges into today's populist, right, you pretty much have to reckon with him. And reckon is really the word here. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm. Podkey.